Obviously very disappointing that Pam Bondi didn't come today, and we're going to be working to make sure in a bipartisan way that her deposition gets rescheduled, or she will be held in contempt, and we have the votes to do that.
Let that sink in for 1 second. The Attorney General of the United States, the top law enforcement officer in the entire country, didn't show up, didn't send a note, didn't reschedule, just didn't come. And standing at the podium at the National Press Club, with cameras rolling and the entire DC press corps in the room, Congressman Khanna looked straight into the lens and delivered the one sentence every cabinet official prays they never hear in public. We have the votes. Not we're considering it. Not we might explore options. The votes. Already counted. Already lined up. Already bipartisan. This was the exact moment the stall tactics stopped working. Because here's what most people don't understand about a congressional contempt vote. It's not a press release. It's not a hashtag. It's a formal finding from the United States Congress that a government official defied a lawful subpoena. And once that vote lands, everything changes. The political cover evaporates. The legal exposure multiplies. And the person at the center of it becomes the story, not the one telling it. And Bondi? She's now the story. The transcript is unambiguous. Khanna said Bondi's deposition will be rescheduled, or contempt proceedings will begin. And he said the votes are already there. In a bipartisan way. Which means this isn't a Democratic fishing expedition anymore. Republicans are on board too. That is the nightmare scenario for any attorney general, and watch what happened next. Because Khanna didn't stop at Bondi. He went bigger. He took the no-show and turned it into a national indictment. He stopped talking about one person skipping one hearing. And he started talking about an entire class of people who think the law simply doesn't apply to them. He gave it a name. And that name is going to stick. The Epstein class. According to the transcript, Khanna defined it very specifically. A group of elites who operate outside the law, powerful men who abused and trafficked young girls without consequence. People who chose being part of a network over speaking up for the victims. And he connected it directly to the moment we're living in right now. Because when Americans see an attorney general ignore a congressional subpoena tied to this exact matter, they don't see a scheduling conflict. They see the pattern. They see the protection racket. They see exactly what Khanna just named from the podium. And this is where everything changed. Because Khanna wasn't just giving a speech. He was laying down a public marker. He was telling every single person watching, and more importantly, every single colleague in Congress, that the clock has started. Reschedule the deposition. Or face the vote. There is no third option.
More troubling, perhaps most troubling, there is growing doubt about whether our nation can have a common national purpose again. Americans simply do not trust government because they see it captured by big money and by the powerful. They see the impunity of people like Pam Bondi not showing up even when Congress subpoenas them. And nothing encapsulates this sense of injustice more than what I call the Epstein class. This is a group of elites who operate outside the law. When people see powerful men abusing and trafficking young girls without consequence, it shakes something fundamental. They have seen the callousness, immaturity, hedonism, venality, rootlessness, and immorality of our governing class. People who chose being part of a network instead of speaking up against the abuse of young girls. And many are asking themselves, if these elite can get away with that, what can't they get away with? They see elite indifference and impunity has led to wealth piling up in the hands of a few in a few places, while the vast majority of this country has faced stagnation and struggling for economic security. Workers and communities have been treated as dispensable, just like these young girls were in the Epstein matter. Fortunes have been built on a foundation of offshoring jobs, automating plants, liquidating companies, buying back stock, and of course, harvesting all of our data. Consider this: 19 billionaires hold over $3 trillion in wealth, 12.5% of our entire economy. This is three times the concentration of the Gilded Age, where we had Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Morgan, and Carnegie. We are in a new Gilded Age. The question is no longer, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? For many, it's, are you better off than you were 4 weeks ago? Decades ago, scholars like William Julius Wilson warned about black job loss hollowing out our inner cities in places like Philadelphia and Milwaukee. Too few listened. Later, economists like Ann Case and Agnes Deaton showed how economic despair was spreading in white working-class communities. We still did not act. Well, now the concern has hit the professional class. I was just up at Brown University, and I asked how many of the folks there are concerned about getting a job in the future. Almost all the hands went up. Even Ivy Leaguers and their parents are concerned. A society fearing its future is a society that is in decline. We do not need to be a nation in fear. So where do we go from here? We cannot go back to the days before Trump. That led to a Democratic Party that had an approval rating of 27%. How and why should we go back to a party or a politics that got us 2 terms of Donald Trump? We cannot simply resort to incrementalism or this fashionable nudges of a broken system. There was a paper written about let's just nudge things in the government. It was heralded as some great academic insight. The era of nudges and incrementalism are over. We need a new generation of leadership, and we need bold, ambitious legislation, the most bold and ambitious programmatic agenda of a generation. I call it a new economic patriotism. I am for Team America. This is a comprehensive new economic vision, a new deal for this era, a freedom budget for this century, a combination of what FDR proposed and Bayard Rustin proposed for our time. Not extractive capitalism, but patriotic, productive, free enterprise that leaves no community behind. When Europe was devastated after World War II, George C. Marshall developed a plan for reindustrialization of Europe. Well, today we need a 21st century Marshall Plan for the middle class and working class of America, mobilizing business, workers, universities, and government to rebuild struggling communities and address our economic divide.
Read the room for a second. He named her, by name, at the National Press Club, in the middle of the most substantive policy speech he's given all year. He didn't bury it in a footnote. He didn't leave it for a follow-up question. He stood there and said, as directly as a sitting congressman can possibly say it, that Pam Bondi's refusal to honor a congressional subpoena is now a national symbol of elite impunity. That is not a casual line. That is a message. And watch the framing, because this is where Khanna's aim gets surgical. He doesn't argue that Bondi is one bad actor. He argues that she's an example, a case study, a living, breathing piece of evidence of a much bigger problem. The transcript is clear on this. He said Americans do not trust government because they see it captured by big money and the powerful. And then he used Bondi's no-show as his proof point. That's the trap he just built around her. Because now, any defense her team offers has to answer a much bigger question. It's not why didn't you show up on Tuesday? It's why should the American people believe you're any different from the Epstein class you were just grouped into on national television? There is no clean answer to that question. There is no press statement that makes it go away. And this is where the whole thing fell apart for her political protection. And look at what Khanna did with that momentum. He didn't soften. He sharpened. According to the transcript, he accused the governing class, his words, of callousness, immaturity, hedonism, venality, ruthlessness, and immorality. 6 adjectives. Fired in sequence. Not one of them accidental. He's telling the country that the people protecting each other at the top are not misunderstood. They're not well-intentioned. They're not complicated. They are, in his framing, morally bankrupt. And then the line that's going to echo for weeks. If these elite can get away with that, what can't they get away with? That is the question that ends political careers. That is the question that moves poll numbers. That is the question every single voter is going to be asking when the contempt vote finally lands on the floor. And Bondi has no good answer. Because the moment you miss a congressional subpoena on the Epstein matter, the moment you force a bipartisan contempt vote, the moment a sitting congressman stands at the National Press Club and links your name to the Epstein class, you have already lost the narrative. You are no longer defending your record. You are defending your reputation. And those are two very different fights. This is why the clip hits the way it does. This isn't anger. This is prosecution. Khanna isn't yelling. He's building a case. Brick by brick. In public. And based on this speech, that case is almost finished. Here is the verdict. Pam Bondi didn't just skip a deposition. She handed her opponents the exact symbol they've been looking for, and Khanna took that symbol, walked it into the National Press Club, and placed it inside a much bigger story. A story about an entire class of people who believe the law is something that happens to other people. She's not getting out of this with a scheduling memo. According to the transcript, the votes for contempt are already there. Bipartisan. Counted. Ready. Khanna said it plainly, in front of every camera in Washington. And the moment he named her next to the Epstein class, he made this a question no attorney general in American history has ever survived untouched. Show up and testify. Or be held in contempt. That's it. That's the choice. And for the first time in a long time, the Epstein class is being told, in public, on the record, by someone who actually has the votes, that the game is over. If you want more breakdowns like this one, the kind that actually pull the evidence straight from the transcript and show you exactly what's happening in DC, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and drop a comment below with one word. Contempt. Just that. Let's see how many of us are paying attention. We'll be watching this deposition fight every step of the way. Don't miss the next one.